All right, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We are continuing, inshallah. Um, I forgot where I left off at. Yeah, so what does it mean that men are supposed to provide for the family? So what it means is that they're supposed to be they're supposed to be bringing in the main means for the family in terms of shelter, in terms of a place that is decent for their faith, a place that is decent for their life, a place that is decent for their life in terms of food, in terms of healthcare, in terms of clothing, in terms of education, in terms of finance, in terms of safety, of course, for their chastity, etc. All these different things are supposed to be included. And then the amount of expansion, so how much does he need to? I mean, you can spend $3,000 a month, and you can probably live for $2,000 a month, and it could be two different places, etc. And you can go up to $7,000 and $8,000 a month. So how much is supposed to be enough? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لِيُنْفِقْ ذُو سَعْةٍ مِّن سَعْتِهِ. Every single person is going to be spending based on their ability, based on their money management, and لا تظلمون ولا تظلمون, without being overspending and without being too selfish or too greedy in spending. So it's about money management and making sure that the basic needs are covered. And the basic needs being covered, like I mentioned, it can actually be determined by the circumstance, by the situation, meaning the person's financial situation, by the place. So he might need to provide, for example, a more decent area just because crime rates are higher in one area, based on his ability, and that's going to be determined based on his ability. Now, the other question is, what if she works? Does she become the decision maker because she is bringing in some income? No, not necessarily. Not necessarily, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم. So the main reason why the man Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose as the decision maker within the household is simply because what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had put within a man's nature. That doesn't necessarily mean that she doesn't have the mind, but he is supposed to respect listening to her, but he does not necessarily have to take her opinion as the final decision. And that's why he will be held accountable and he will be held responsible a lot more, meaning that this is a place of taklif and not tashrif. Qawama is a responsibility and not an honor. So what with the feminist movements trying to push towards a certain idea and to say that yes, they need to also be decision makers. Even in any government, in any company, there's only one president for that company. We cannot have too many presidents. We cannot have too many decision makers, but we can have people that can support, that can help in the decision making, but the final decision making is going to be in one person. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had actually mentioned who he's choosing, and he has chosen that the man would be responsible over the household because of what was created in him within his nature, and also because of another reason, which is because of the financial coverage that and maintenance that they do. But even if the wife is bringing in some income, it doesn't necessarily mean that the man's right or the man's responsibility to be the decision maker and to maintain the household, which is al-qawama, it doesn't mean that he loses it because she too is also making a part of the income. Does a woman have to pay part of her income onto the household or within the marriage? That there are different opinions between scholars, and the differences of opinions were not necessarily based on a text. It was more based on a culture within their community and what those scholars regarded as justice. So some scholars said she would have to pay zero of her income, which is the Hanbali madhab, and the others said half of her income, or two-thirds, or one-third. There are almost 6 to 7 different opinions relating this issue as to what is a fair amount of her income to be paid, because she's leaving the house and she's actually getting some income. But it's very important to mention that there is no evidence to prove any opinion. There is no evidence to prove that it's zero, which unfortunately a lot of times it becomes so common that people want to praise Islam and they will just say, oh, she doesn't pay anything, even if she was a millionaire. If she's a millionaire and she had the money from before, yes, she doesn't have to pay anything. But if she is working, meaning she's leaving the household, getting a job and bringing in some income, then that's where scholars had different opinions on. In situations like that, in situations like that, it is best to leave it based on the agreement that she would agree. Let's say she's a doctor, and let's say he's an engineer, and she's making 6 grand and he's making 4.5 or 5,000, and then of course they're going to have some disagreement on how much is going to be with this household and to pay for the household and to pay for probably sent to the family. And this brings in some disagreement. And this is why it's extremely important to discuss these issues before even getting married, just to make sure that confusions don't happen later on, because most family problems are really as a result of money management. And is she overspending? Is he overspending? Is he sending too much for his family? How much is he going to take? So that's why it's really important to agree on this matter before even getting married, or even during the marriage, on what it looks like to be fair and what it looks like to make sense for both, in order to make sure that the marriage, and that when it comes to numbers and money, that both sides are somehow agreeing to a certain justice, or a certain amount that they consider it fair. Uh, the Maliki madhab is the most madhab that had the differences of opinions on this issue. It could be related more to culture, because in the Maliki madhab, of course, Amal Ahl al-Madina, the action of Ahl al-Madina, and in the Maliki madhab, and actually all the madhahib, they would regard that al-adatu muhakkima or muhakkama, meaning that the situation, the circumstances, the rulings may be determined based on the urf, may be determined based on the custom and the culture within that society. And this a lot of times does change because of the situation that here in the West, women are more pushed to work for many reasons. One, it could be because the spending and the expenses have become too high, so it would require two sides to work. And number two is that the situation is that many women are being told by the feminist movement that in order for you to be worthy and to really be of somebody that has made a difference within the community, is really only if you work. Just give me a second. Yes. I'm so sorry that I'm just trying to record something and the voices are so loud. I'm so sorry. Because he cannot understand me, so. لا هو مش فاهم عليك عشان المخاطر. عشان المخاطر. Okay, let's go. Sorry about that, but the people next to me are so loud and I can barely even hear myself. All right, so let's go on to another question. Why are, okay, where's the question? Okay, why are men allowed to have multiple wives? Oh no. Okay. Oh no. Okay, why are men allowed to have multiple wives? And oh, we answered that one. Okay. It has been 5 years and I look around. Okay, so this, oh no, all the questions have been deleted. La ilaha illallah. All right. I hope I remember the questions. All right, so one other sister asked a question, which is, I'll go back to the Facebook and actually see those questions really fast. I forgot what the questions were, and unfortunately, they got lost from my phone. Yes, hold on. It's just that they got lost from the phone. Okay, here we go. So the question says, I am divorced twice and I did my istikhara. So what does istikhara reveal? This is a very important question because many times people think that istikhara is supposed to be giving some kind of a dream, and is supposed to reveal some kind of an answer to their question, which is not necessarily accurate. Istikhara is a dua. The dua is seen from the words, Allahumma inni astakhiruka bi'ilmik. Ya Allah, I seek refuge in the knowledge that you have. وأسألك اللهم إني أستخيرك بعلمك وأسألك اللهم إني أستخيرك بعلمك. Okay, now I lost it. And then part of the dua would say, Allahumma in kunta ta'lam anna hadha al-amr khayrun li fi dini. Ya Allah, if you know that this matter is better for my religion and better for, in other words, for better for my akhirah and better for my dunya, then make it happen. And if you know that this is bad for my religion and bad for my life, then keep it away from me and keep me away from it. So Allahumma inni astakhiruka بعلمك وأستقدرك بقدرتك وأسألك من فضلك العظيم فأنت تعلم ولا أعلم وأنت علام الغيوب. This is just putting the base of what you're trying to say, what you're trying to do. It's a dua. And the dua, there are adab for the dua. The adab for the dua is that you relate and you connect with the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then you make the dua. So the dua starts, Ya Allah, I seek refuge in your knowledge. وَأَسْتَقْدِرُكَ بِقُدْرَتِكَ, and I ask you with the almighty powers that you have. وَأَسْأَلُكَ مِنْ فَضْلِكَ الْعَظِيمِ, and I ask you with the great blessings that you give. فأنت تعلم ولا أعلم, because you know and I don't know. وأنت تقدر ولا أقدر, and you are able and I'm not able. And then you make the dua. So this is telling you that istikhara is a dua, and there doesn't necessarily have to be a dream. Unfortunately, I would say most people relate istikhara to a dream, and then they would think that they have to wait for a dream and that's going to give them the answer. Not necessarily quite true. And to say I'm divorced twice and I did my istikhara, divorced twice, twice, and I'm assuming that the sister is saying that she did her istikhara before those marriages and she still got divorced. I'm assuming that that's what she said. Number one is that when we look at evil, of course, divorce is not necessarily something good. When we look at evil, it doesn't necessarily mean that if you do istikhara that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not answer your dua, al-istikhara. But when we look at evil, it's very important to understand that Many times we have a very narrow view of what evil looks like, and we would have a very narrow understanding and see evil as something that only contains absolute evil. Not every evil that happens to you is necessarily absolute evil. Some evil things that may happen to you are actually for your good, but you may not know what is hidden and what is the wisdom behind that evil that you saw, and you only see in it as absolute evil. Even if you might have done istikhara, you don't know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is keeping for you, and why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala right now it passed, you got divorced twice, and you tried your best to find the right husband, it just didn't work out, etc. You need to see what the wisdom's behind it, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the istikhara was not answered. What do we learn from Surah Al-Kahf? In Surah Al-Kahf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us the story of Musa with that pious man, in where he was wondering, why did you break that, or why did you build the wall, even though these people in this village did not even provide us any food, and we asked them for food. You could have asked them for money. And then the other story is where that Prophet Musa alayhi salam was angry as why he put a hole in that ship and ended up making those poor people not having a good ship. And then he explained to him that the reason why that wall, he built it without paying, without asking for a pay, was really because Prophet Musa alayhi salam was only seeing the time now and not seeing the future. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave that pious man the power, not necessarily to see the future, but certain knowledge. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala let that man build the wall because these children had certain money underneath the wall. If that village was to discover the money that was underneath the wall, these orphans would lose their financial rights forever, because this village had people that were really greedy, and they were ready to take those aitam, or those orphans' rights. Now, when we look at that, we see that you might see that that particular bad thing that happened in your life, that it's absolute evil, and then feel that it's probably the istikhara that I did that did not go through. Not quite. It's not that the istikhara didn't go through, it's that Allahu A'lam what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is keeping for you. Allahu A'lam what kind of reward, or what kind of future or wisdom that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving you. You might see only that, oh, I went through this divorce and it was really hard on me, but you might get the reward of patience later on. You might get the reward of patience later on. And just like Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, he was thrown in the well, but if he wasn't thrown in the well, he would have never made it to be in the minister of Egypt. And this is something that we always have to remember. Sometimes you will be put in an area where you definitely are sure that that is so bad, that is so heartbreaking, but you didn't know that it was our plan to get you in a higher rank in another end, or to take you into another place. Be careful. Be careful from the view that you might have on certain things. Because if it wasn't Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam that was put in the well, he would have never made it to being the prime minister, or being the minister or treasurer of Egypt. Question number 2. A man doesn't need a permission from his wives to marry again up to 4 times. But why does a woman need a permission from the husband to work and leave the house? So number 1 is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala permitted certain things, and this is not necessarily related to this. So marrying 4 wives, it's not related to asking the husband for permission to leave the house. This is not related to that. It's that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala set certain rulings in order to bring about stability within the homes and in order to bring about stability within the society. So you only see it as from a narrow perspective. So why is my husband allowed to marry more than one woman? You only see it from the perspective of your own situation, your own greed as a woman, which all women would definitely want their husbands to themselves, but we don't necessarily see it from a farther perspective, which is the hikmah of Rabbil Alameen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's wisdom is that He had permitted something for a general wisdom, a farther wisdom than your own little narrow, in a very centered perspective, which is only your household. No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a wider wisdom. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, أَلَا يَعْلَمُ مَنْ خَلَقَ وَهُوَ اللَّطِيفُ الْخَبِيرُ. He was the one that created everything. Indeed, He is the one that has, or is the one that created everything, and He knows and has the ilm, has the knowledge, and He is the most subtle. So He knows these things that you may not necessarily know the details in the long run and what it means. As for, so the hikmah in polygamy, or having more than one wife, is more a society, on a society level, not in your own home level. What's the evidence in that? The evidence in that is actually found in Surah An-Nisa. In Surah An-Nisa, you could see that the Quran was actually discouraging men from having multiple wives, or let me say up to 4 wives. And the discouragement is actually seen in the ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually mentions that فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا فَوَاحِدًا. And if you fear that you may not be just, then make or only marry one. The reason why the ayah says فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا, if you fear that you will not be just, on a smaller scale, the Quran is actually suggesting monogamous marriages. But on a global scale, or let me say universal maxim, it's still regarded that polygamy is permissible. In a centered scale, it was saying, فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا, if you fear that you won't be just, meaning that there's a very high chance and the probability goes higher in cases of polygamy. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala still permitted it, even though discouraged it in fear of injustices, but still considered it as permissible because of the wisdom and because of the impact that it might have in different circumstances at a global scale, meaning injustice at a global scale. In Islam, it always tells you that justice is not necessarily based on your looking at your own situation and your own circumstance, but there are circumstances that can be considered at a global level, despite the fact that on a personal or an individual level, it may seem harmful. For example, we may curtail or we may put certain conditions on personal freedoms, on individual freedoms, just because we want safety, or we want chastity, or we want to make sure that certain numbers of women are not left without husbands and without having those rights of having maintainers or spouses that are helping them within their society. Now, as for the question where it says, what about the woman? Why does she need to seek a permission to leave the home? This is a ruling at an individual level. On an individual level, she cannot leave the home without the husband's permission. And again, this is not relating to the idea where, okay, so why are they allowed to marry? Because the ayah is talking about as a legislature in general. But on an individual level, the ayah was clear that women should not leave their husband's home without their husband's permission. The home is a replica or is exactly like any other nation. Nations have big securities on areas where people can get out of the country or come in. In order to have any management, the most important thing that you need to manage is who's exiting the nation or the home and who's coming in. And that's why in all countries, there's something called a visa that is stamped, just to make sure that the government is overlooking security, managing who's coming in and what is going out and who's going out, just to make sure that it's able to control and make sure and instill and enforce security within that country. And that's the same thing within the home. If this husband is obliged to be responsible over the household, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave, just as there are citizens within the country that have to obey the president's laws or the government's laws, and that's the same thing. The wife is obliged to obey certain laws just to make sure that this home is stable, that this home is secure, that this home is under management and is not in chaos. So when we look at that, I know many women, especially in our day and age where the feminist movement is trying to convince women that, especially with some of the most important feminists, Simone de Beauvoir, who was considering that marriage, children, and a woman's body are the main enemies of a woman's success. And unfortunately, a lot of Muslim women are buying that and right now trying to get out of anything that where a husband may have rights over the wife. And the ayah is actually clear, وَلِلرِّجَالِ عَلَيْهِنَّ دَرَجَةٌ, and that it's not necessarily 100% equity in marriage. In fact, the ayah is clear, and that there are more rights over, the husband has more rights over the wife than the wife has rights on her husband. The ayah is very clear on that. So it's not absolute equity. And at the same time, the hikmah or the wisdom is to maintain stability. If there are situations where the husband may transgress the limits or take advantage of the woman, psychological, maybe physical, financial, sexual, the list goes on and on. If the husband is taking advantage of the wife in any of those things, she may raise the issue to the qadi, to the judge, and actually seek an exit out of this marriage, or even seek different ways to help and make sure that she is not oppressed in this marriage. Here's another question. Allah commands everyone to be good to their parents. What if a parent is unjust with their kids? They favor other siblings more than one. Can the child just be polite and civil with parents and not be too involved with them? What does it mean if a parent doesn't forgive their child? Will their janazah prayer be accepted? So number one is that when we talk about parents, there are several things that determine what it means to be polite, or bir al-walidain, what it means to be in a situation of polite or goodness with the parents. One, it can be determined based on the general good terms, the general وإن جاهدك على أن تشرك بما ليس لك به علم فلا تطعهما وصاحبهما في الدنيا معروفا. The ayah says, and if they fight you to associate partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then don't answer or don't obey them in that particular part. But صاحبهما في الدنيا معروفة. But be a friend to them in this life on good terms. When we say on good terms, this is a very vast, this is a very a comprehensive term. And what determines good terms is really one, the circumstance, the parent's circumstance, and two, the urf. The urf meaning the custom. So within that society is the custom that you have to visit your parents every day, that you have to send money to your parents every month, or certain money income, or to etc. If this is the urf, then you would have to do this custom in order to seek your parents' content, and to please your parents. If the parents are not necessarily in need, they're just abusing the child, if in situations of abuse, you do have the right to not get abused, but rejecting respectfully for the abuse. So let's say your parents want to take away your home, for example. That, sorry, Dad, I can't. Let's say they somehow beat you or etc. You cannot fight back. You have to reject peacefully, reject respectfully this abuse, even if they favor one sibling more than another. Even if they favor one sibling more than another, in the end, you still have to put in that respect, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala obliged you to do that respect, not because of what they are doing. So akhlaq are not determined based on how the person is reacting with you, but the akhlaq that you put into practice is based on what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had commanded you to do. A generous person is going to always be generous, or is supposed to always be generous, whether they were living a hard situation, financial situation, or whether they were living in an extravagant and luxurious situation. The circumstances, political, financial, etc., it doesn't mean that you put in akhlaq based on what other people are putting in, and you don't relate to people based on who they are, but you relate to people based on who and what you are, not what they are, but what you are. As a Muslim, as a salih person, you relate with your parents in a salih way because you are salih, because you are pious, not because they are being nice to you, or they are they're being impolite. You're going to be impolite. All right. Can the child just be polite and civil with parents and not be too involved? No. They can't be just civil and just be polite, meaning, hey, salamu alaikum, and just hang up. Nope. You would have to get involved as much as the circumstance and the culture requires that you get involved with your parents, and as much as they expect you to get involved with them. So this is birrul walidain. And that's why it's actually jihad. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had commanded it as the jihad that you do. وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. That after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed that you would only worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you act kindly and justly with your parents, right after obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala considered that obeying the parents becomes as the second most important and most important good deed that you do. Can a woman, another question, what does it mean if a parent doesn't forgive their child? If the parent doesn't forgive the child, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did actually consider that the parents, or the Prophet ﷺ did consider that the parents not not being pleased with their child is actually a sign of the person lacking piety. So they have to work on that. But at the same time, it if the parent is not content over their child for wrong reasons, then the child, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be the one to judge between that parent and the child. But generally speaking, although it's not based on an authentic evidence, but there is a scholar, I forgot what his name was, but he mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not answer Prophet Musa's dua on Fir'aun, on the Pharaoh, until after 40 years, because Fir'aun was very kind to his mother. Not necessarily an authentic thing, but something just to ponder in. Here's another question. Can a woman on her period wash a dead body? Yes, a woman on her period can wash a dead body. Purification is not required for the person that is washing the dead at all. In fact, they can be in major or minor impurity, and it doesn't matter. But you would do the wudu for the deceased, not for yourself. It doesn't matter. Here's another question. I would like to add, if the husband, here's a question. What are the rulings on living with your mother-in-law if they don't get along and the relationship is toxic because she is too dominating and it leads to a fight between husband and wife, and she doesn't even let them go out alone? Can wife demand to live separately? This is a very, very important question. And this is a very common issue, specifically with certain societies, mainly within Asian communities and Indo-Pakistani communities. Number one is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had considered that the woman has the right to live in a separate home where she has full privacy to herself. That's number one. And all the scholars had actually mentioned that in all the madhahib, that she has the right to live in a home where nobody else is sharing that home with her, and that she has the total privacy to herself between her and her husband. That's number one. Number two is that even if we actually say that she has the total right to have a complete privacy, etc., there are circumstances where applying this right might actually be contradicting somebody else's right, which is the mother-in-law's right. The mother-in-law could be maybe needing special care, or the mother-in-law or the woman's husband may not have the financial ability to buy his mother a separate home, or three, that the circumstance is that she needs some special care, special assistance, etc. When we look at these situations, we cannot only look at one side and not look at the big picture, because that is an act of an injustice. If the husband is capable of buying his mother and father a separate home, and that is not going to affect negatively on the mother-in-law psychologically, safety, and physically, if it's not, or medically, if it's not going to affect her negatively, then he should buy her a separate place where the mother-in-law will feel safe and will feel independent, etc. But most circumstances, the reason why they happen like that is because the son or the husband is not able to afford to buy a separate home for the mother-in-law, or the mother-in-law needs certain care. And then we cannot just speak about one justice and say, yeah, the wife has the right to be in an independent home, and therefore who cares about the mother-in-law? This is an act of injustice. This is inhumane to actually just look at one side and not consider the other side, or think that regardless you still have to buy your mother a home or let her live somewhere else because I want a time of romance, I want a time of privacy, I don't want her being dominant, etc. There are certain things that we may need to live in patience with, because that's what justice is, because that's what taqwa is, because that's what akhlaq are. Akhlaq, justice, and taqwa is actually part and a main part of a person's faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking me to treat the people on the street justly and kindly, how is it with my husband's mother that may need certain care? Would I just sit there and consider it piety to just complain, well, this is your mother and not my mother, and I have nothing to do with this? This is not Islam. Just as you are supposed to treat the people on the street kindly, well, it is not piety at all to see your mother-in-law as needing her son or needing a place to live in and actually say, well, just get her out, I just want to have peace and quiet. Somebody's shelter is more important than the extravagance of romance and having those certain moments. If the mother-in-law is dominating or is trying to always fight and trying to rule, etc., you want to know that there are different things that may have led to a very common behavior and attitude in mother-in-laws, is that you want to put certain things based on a clock, on a certain chronology here. The chronology is that you came in the middle of the story, not in the beginning of the story. The beginning of the story is that she's the mother. She was the one that raised him. She was the one that has the most right over her son. You just came in the middle of the story to think that your husband has more right over you than his mom. You want to be careful with that, because time turns around and your children are watching the way you treat your mother-in-law, and your children are watching every single thing. Time turns around, and if you oppress anybody, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take revenge from you, even if she is dominating. You want to remember, maintaining akhlaq is not because of who they are, but because of who you are. You maintain your akhlaq because you are a person of akhlaq. You maintain patience because you are a woman of patience. You maintain your principle because you are a woman of principle. If somebody transgresses their limits because older age makes them not easy to deal with, they become so stiff or so fastened to a certain ideas or certain experiences, and then they force it on you that no, this is the right way. I've had experience in life to know that this is the right way and any other way is the wrong way, and this is very normal. Be patient. Be patient, and sometimes winning the heart is more important than winning the argument. Win the heart, and inshallah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will actually give you the reward for winning the heart than winning the argument. And sorry if I'm here a little harsh on the sister that asked the question. I don't mean to be harsh, but it's part of the discipline that we may not realize, that the Prophet ﷺ said that part of the signs of Judgment Day is that the man would obey his wife to abandon his mother. So be careful from being one of those women that will pressure her husband to abandon his mother just to live in peace and quiet. And it's very important to find ways where you could win the heart over the argument. Here's another question. I would like to add, if the husband wants to live permanently with her and the wife suggests that instead of that she can live 6 months with them and maybe okay, this is what the English is saying, or this writing is saying, may divide the time between the rest of the siblings, especially where more help is available. Is anything wrong with that? Is the wife being disrespectful in any way? If the time can be divided, and it is for the woman's sake. This is something that can be worked out. But if there are different circumstances that you may not be aware of, and your husband may insist that he wants to do this because he may not share the dramas that his mother might be complaining about the other in-laws, and if the child wanted his mother to himself and take care of her because he wants to be the pious son, and because she's complaining of other dramas in the home, in other homes, the son, if he insists, and he decided in the end, the husband decided that he wants to keep the mother within that home, he does have the right to actually say, no, I'm going to keep her here based on some information that I gathered, and I need my mother to be in my home because of justice that he sees. He will be held accountable for that, or maybe because of certain wisdom that he might see. If there, it's not just that, it's not necessarily an injustice relating to other dramas in the household, but it's lack of power. It's very important to remember, don't let these dramas happen in front of the mother-in-law, because it can definitely create lots of depression in the mother-in-law, where she will feel that now my children grew and now I'm deserted and nobody wants me to be there. And it takes, unfortunately, when we see it, a mother can take care of 10 boys and 10 men, but 10 men cannot take care of one mother. Don't be one of those people that are one of the signs of Judgment Day, where they're pressuring their husbands to abandon their mother. And be a woman that will lead her husband to Jannah, lead her husband and her children to Jannah, and rather than push and make those fights in order to seek a happy moment. Trust me, a happy moment you will get when you actually bring in more taqwa. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually tells you that the believers, they don't find fear and they won't find sadness. Have taqwa, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring you in more happiness in the marriage. Have taqwa, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make the most romantic times come in because you've got the taqwa in you. Taqwa brings in happiness. Taqwa brings in happy moments. And remember, the Salihin used to say, I would know that I had lost my deen, and I have had bad moments of lost my deen and bad moments on my deen, because I would see أثر ذلك على دابتي, on the akhlaq of my children, on my husband's akhlaq, on the akhlaq of even the things around me, my car, etc. Things will turn off on me because of the akhlaq or because of the bad iman that I had. You will see, have more taqwa, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will change the circumstance. Here's another question. How to deal with delay in marriage? She says, I'm almost 24 years old. I started looking for a marriage when I was 18 and 19 years old. It has been 5 years now, and when I look around me, everyone I know got married, got kids, and I feel stuck at the same place. I have everyone asking me all the time when I'm getting married. I know it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's qadar, but it's giving me really bad anxiety and waswas, that is PTSD, of despair and sadness. Also, many brothers are not interested in marriage because they do not want their wife wearing niqab in the West. Many people tell me to remove it or I'll never get married. I don't believe it at all, but it's giving me waswas, PTSD. So if you have any nasiha on how to deal with my situation, please share. All right. Several things here. Number one, when we talk about delay in marriage, almost 24 years old, that's still young in our times and in the West. 24 years old, that's very young still. Um, you say you started looking for marriage when you were 18 and 19 years old. I do matchmaking, and I'll tell you, 18 and 19 years old, usually, usually at 18, 19, the circumstances within the West, it's usually hard to find somebody when you're 18, 19 years old, because the men that suit an 18 and 19 year old woman are usually not yet financially stable, or not yet educationally stable. So they don't usually look for a wife that is within their 24 or 23 years old. It's very rare. As a matchmaker, most of the guys are actually looking to get married at age 28, 29, 30, and above. So don't go in despair yet. You're still young. And you say it has been 5 years. In the West, in the West, indeed, it is very hard to find a suitable match, uh, because the vast areas are making Muslims live in separate areas where they don't know about each other. And another thing is that at many times the cultural differences, so we've got Muslims that are from different cultural backgrounds, and these cultural backgrounds sometimes make it harder to bring in a successful relationship because of the cultural differences. It might add on to the miscommunication, and this is valid. But I would say maybe try looking for different ways to seek marriage. Seek online matchmaking. There are online halal matchmaking websites, such as IslamicMatrimonial.com, I think, or IslamicMatchmakers.com. I think this is what it's called. You can online, I don't mean talking to guys randomly on Facebook like that, but what I mean is that there are certain online Islamic matchmaking websites that are overlooked and overseen by certain matchmakers, just that make sure that this is going within the Islamic guidelines, and making sure that this is going for a marriage purpose, that there's no romantic or chatting where it's going outside of the adab that it was supposed to be, going through in Islam. So I would say online, tell within your community that you're interested in getting married. People, they would know you, they would get to know you. So it's okay to tell people out there that you're interested in getting married, and people will find you a match based on what they know about you. And this is really important. People, based on who you are, people will say and will know that when a person, based on their knowledge about you, so you be the right person, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send you the right person. But there's nothing wrong with saying out there that you're interested in getting married. So it's okay, share it in the masjid, talk to the imam if you're or probably have a third party, or your mother or your father actually talk to the imam. I would consider that over you talking personally. Talk to your father and mother and let them talk to the imam to see if there's a good match. Another thing, but I want to add one thing, is that you want to know that marriage is rizq. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whoever has taqwa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open them an exit. وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبْ, and will give them a rizq from where they least expect it. Just have taqwa. You be the salihah. You be the pious woman, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring your rizq to your own very home. But it doesn't mean that you cannot seek to actually get married. There's nothing wrong with it. Don't have despair. And remember, rizq, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring it when it's time for you. I do matchmaking, so maybe I can help. Send me some information. Hopefully I can help. Here's another thing that she says. Many brothers are not interested in marriage because they don't want their wife wearing niqab in the West. That takes me into a different topic, because niqab is not only misunderstood by niqab, which is the veil, face covering. Niqab is not only misunderstood by the non-Muslims, and the stereotypical images are not only spread by non-Muslims, but the stereotypical images are also spread within the Muslim community, where the face covering, especially in certain communities, they don't understand it, and unfortunately step back because of fear, because of misunderstanding. And I would relate the misunderstanding about niqab and or facial covering is really a result of the lacking ilm within the Muslim community. And within the Muslim community, they lack the tradition and lack the ilm and lack the understanding of sunnah. So they would see it as, this is not part of our culture, therefore this is different, therefore this is Wahhabi, this is Salafi, and which is actually not accurate at all. In fact, facial covering, although I do not consider it as obligatory, I consider it as sunnah, meaning that is recommended but not necessarily obligatory. It is part of the Islamic tradition. And if people think that you will be more accepted just by taking off some of your hijab or reducing the levels of hijab, maybe wearing a different type of clothing, maybe adding more and reducing your modesty level, you actually got it wrong. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and وَلَن تَرْضَى عَنْكَ الْيَهُودُ وَلَا النَّصَارَى حَتَّى تَتَّبِعَ مِلَّتَهُم. And the Jews and the Christians will not be content over you unless you follow their religion, unless you follow their faith, unless you follow their interpretation of principle, unless you follow their interpretation of ethics. That's the only time when they're willing to accept you. So if you think that by giving up on a principle that you will be more accepted and you will be more tolerated, unfortunately, that is the reaction of many of the Muslims. They think that if I give up and I actually say that Islam tolerates LGBT or Islam tolerates this, and I go against certain things in Islam, that I'll be appreciated more, I'll be respected more. This is totally dangerous, that it is unfortunately even practiced by some claimed dua. Niqab, facial covering, is actually part of the Islamic tradition. It was practiced by Ummahat al-Mu'mineen. It was practiced by the Muslim women throughout all the different madhahib. The change of the level of hijab was as a result of westernization, globalization, the feminist movements, and a lot of the Muslims not understanding their religion right. Although, like I mentioned, I regard niqab as sunnah, meaning it is recommended but not obligatory. Despite all that I had said, it's up to you unless you see it as obligatory, that's a different story. But it's up to you whether you decided to wear it or not, meaning the facial covering. I regard it as sunnah. I cover it, and I feel that it's better for my deen. It doesn't mean that I consider it obligatory, but in the end is that if you If you feel that this is an obstacle, it may be indeed sometimes be so, because many men and Muslim men don't really understand it. But the question is, if this man is not understanding that niqab is part of an Islamic tradition, it's part of Islam, is this man necessarily the right person that you would want to be married to? If he doesn't know what Islamic tradition is, and he doesn't know how to embrace Islamic traditions and things that were practiced uh, practiced throughout history by Muslim women, is this necessarily a person that is going to appreciate other things that you are practicing, or is this person just wanting or brainwashed to think that, oh, it's only about looks? So you just want to question, really, if a person does not want to approach because you wear a niqab, is it necessarily something that suits you? The other thing is that I do agree that in the West, wearing niqab is a lot harder than in Gulf countries. I totally agree with that, but it depends on where you are. And I would say it's up to you. I don't know where about you live in the West. It's up to you to determine whether this is something that suits you, or whether this is something that might actually bring in more hardship than the fitna that you're in. I regard it as sunnah, but I still wear it. Alhamdulillah, in the state that I live in, I have not found and I have not encountered any major hardships. In fact, I work at a Catholic university, and I don't find any hardship at all. So this is my opinion, but in the end is that, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you make dua, and make the dua, Allahumma la tadharni fardan wa anta khayrul warithin. Allahumma la tadharni fardan wa anta khayrul warithin. Make that dua, and inshallah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept your dua. Don't give up, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one to give rizq. And this is the end of our session. We'll see you all next month, inshallah. You can post your questions, and hopefully we'll see you then. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.